Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, a leaked draft of a UN memo suggests that dozens of allegations of sexual abuse by UN peacekeepers in Central African Republic may have been made up by people taking advantage of financial payoffs. The body's process of dealing with the abuse claims has long been criticised. Also, the foreign ministers of several of Libya's neighbours meet in Niger to discuss a way forward in tackling security across the Sahel. The instability in Libya that followed the revolution of 2011 has had ramifications throughout the region. And Congo's normally bustling capital is paralysed by a stay-at-home day called by the main opposition bloc in protest over plans to extend President Joseph Kabila's stay in power beyond the end of his term in December. Well, first, a leaked draft of a UN memo suggests that dozens of allegations of sexual abuse by UN peacekeepers in Central African Republic may have been made up by people taking advantage of financial payoffs. The 12,000-strong UN MINUSCA mission in Central African Republic was deployed in 2014, and the UN's come under fire for its handling of abuse claims that have dogged troops. An expanded inquiry this year looked into accusations in the region of Decoa. A memo citing information from the UN Office of Internal Oversight Services has said that a local charity that referred abuse accusations to the UN had offered complainants a monthly remuneration scheme. One social worker was suspected of having encouraged people to come forward and then taken a cut of the payout. Now, the memo suggests that up to half of the 150 cases of alleged abuse it focused on were not supported by any evidence. Peter Gallo is a former investigator at the UN's OIOS. I asked him earlier whether the concerns could let the body off the hook.
There is always going to be a number of false complaints in a situation like this, just as there is always a possibility that you're going to get a false allegation of rape in France or England or anywhere else. The reason so many have come forward was because of the intense press attention and the scrutiny which followed the original scandal involving Mr. Anders Kampe 2 years ago. But the very fact that some of the victims are receiving payments, you're dealing with people who are essentially living on welfare, in many cases living in refugee camps. The fact that someone has received a payment or is receiving financial support from an NGO does not automatically discredit them, or it should not automatically discredit them as a witness. Again, it falls to the sophistication of the investigation techniques which are required to determine whether, in fact, this person is a genuine victim, or whether the UN is essentially looking for an excuse to close these cases.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by Andrew Brook, UNICEF's Regional Chief for Child Protection in West and Central Africa. Andrew, thanks very much for speaking to us. Now, as we just heard there, Peter Gallo says that it's difficult to prove sexual abuse. The memo says that up to half the cases it was referring to had insufficient evidence. Does that go to say that the claims won't be followed up by UN investigators?
I think my understanding is that the memo is not a conclusive outcome to an investigative process. That's still going on. So we're probably best advised to wait for that, the outcome of the investigation, significant number of children involved, and see on the basis of this, where to move forward.
So does all this, the suggestions contained in that memo suggest that the scale of the problem is less than initially thought?
Well, I think your previous speaker had a good point, and it's somebody with the experience of the investigation that, children's accounts are not to be discredited necessarily on the basis of what seems to be insufficient evidence. The challenges of gaining the evidence, what we know from all over the world, where children make allegations of sexual abuse. If we look at the proportionality between the children who make the allegations and the number of prosecutions that follow, it's proportionately very low because it's a difficult process. And I think we would apply the same principle to the children in Central African Republic. We would take very much a view that if children do feel confident, and I think the previous speaker is right, there was a moment in time where the space opened up for children to come forward because they did feel that they were going to be listened to, they did feel that they were going to be supported. How these investigations, the outcome of them, we still need to see that. I don't think we have any official record on that. But we, as an organisation, as a child rights and child protection organisation, will continue to be available to children. We'll continue to listen to children. We'll continue to provide support and services to children who come forward and make these allegations before, during, and after the investigative process. That's something that's very important.
Now, any system that offers payment for claims of abuse is likely to be abused itself. Is this one that was brought in by the NGO with which UNICEF works, or by UNICEF itself?
I think we should put the issue of the financial support to children within a much broader response to vulnerability of children who've come forward and made these allegations, and well beyond the specificities of allegations around peacekeepers abusing children. As a standard response to children who've been sexually abused and exploited, there's medical support, there's psychosocial support, counselling support, assistance to the families, assessment of the vulnerability and risk to the families. And in some of the cases where children's families have been assessed, where their situation has been assessed, they've been found to be in extreme poverty. So on top of the assistance related to medical and psychosocial support, one of the interventions is around...
Andrew?
Yes.
Andrew, I'm sorry, we have run out of time. I'm going to have to stop you there. But thank you very much for joining us. That's Andrew Brooks, UNICEF's Regional Chief for Child Protection for West and Central Africa, joining us from Senegal. In other news, the foreign ministers of several of Libya's neighbours met in Niger on Wednesday to discuss a way forward in tackling security across the Sahel. Instability in Libya has affected the spread of terror groups, organised crime and people trafficking throughout the region. 5 years after the 2011 revolution in which leader Muammar Gaddafi was killed, and Tripoli, the capital, remains in chaos as rival authorities and militia battle for control.
Muammar Gaddafi was killed near his hometown of Sirte. 5 years on, there are still clashes in the city. It's the last holdout of the Islamic State group. Forces loyal to the UN-backed government hope to wrest control of Sirte soon.
We have been making a lot of progress. God willing, the jihadists will soon be defeated in Sirte.
In the capital, Tripoli, fighting has ceased, but residents complain about power cuts, price hikes and the lack of cash flow.
What we are going through now is much worse than before. Now Libya is threatened with extinction.
The situation is kind of bad, but thank God after 5 years it's slowly starting to improve.
A UN-backed unity government arrived in Tripoli in March. It's led by Fayez al-Sarraj, but he has struggled to assert his authority nationwide. A rival parliament in the country's east refuses to cede power to his government. Instead, it supports General Khalifa Haftar. His forces ousted jihadists from Benghazi, but his detractors say his aim is to establish a new military dictatorship. Many Libyans are frustrated. They feel they are only faced with two choices: military rule under a strongman like Gaddafi used to be, or the chaos of these last 5 years, with militias and jihadists fighting for the control of the oil-rich country.
In DRC, Kinshasa was shut down Wednesday by a strike over plans to extend the president's stay in office, with a deal signed this week to postpone the presidential vote until 2018.
Kinshasa was unusually quiet Wednesday morning. The streets were empty, the majority of shops closed, no traffic. The opposition's call for a general strike seemed to have been followed. A frustration to the government's efforts to stop protests and to those few who did head out.
I'm giving Kabila a yellow card. Look, I'm wearing yellow for Mr. Kabila Kabange.
I decided to work because we cannot leave the city like this. We need to have some active service like they do in Europe.
In contrast to the deserted capital, in Beni, in the northeast, hundreds of peaceful protesters were on the streets. Many carried yellow cards to indicate their fading patience with President Joseph Kabila, who they want to see gone by the end of the year. A political deal's been struck which could see him stay on if presidential elections are postponed until 2018. The opposition believes that Wednesday's demonstrations have sent a clear rejection of the plan.
In the whole country, our people just answered back and rejected Mr. Kabila's agreement. But they also asked for the respect of the Constitution.
Some shops and services did start opening around midday. The government believes that's proof that people weren't staying away because of their convictions.
L'apparence ne traduit pas la réalité.
Appearances can be deceiving.
De se réveiller un peu plus tard.
If Kinshasans chose to wake up late, it was more to take their precautions, because they know the opposition can cause unrest, than to answer the call of the opposition.
Things should get back to normal soon enough in Kinshasa, but the opposition is already calling for more action. It's determined to keep up the pressure for Kabila to step down by the 19th of December at the latest.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us. Do so again.